In a close-knit suburb in Greater Manchester, an 18-year-old student is nowhere to be found after completing her A-levels.
She had messaged her friends and said she would meet them afterwards. However, that was the last anybody heard of Ellen that day.
They are getting increasingly concerned because it is very out of character. Has she fallen and hurt herself? Has she got really lost?
Police launch a wide-scale search for the missing teenager.
They were aware that this potentially could end badly.
Is there something in their background that might give you a clue as to what happened?
Did Ellen have any enemies? Was there anyone who wished her any harm? Was she in conflict?
This has a really big effect on the village. There's concern about what's happened to her. Something nefarious happened to her. Is there somebody in their midst who has potentially hurt Ellen?
Orrell is a suburb of Wigan in Greater Manchester in England. It is known for its natural beauty and historic ties to the coal mining industry.
The small town of Orrell is quite a nice spot. It's described as somewhere that has generations of people living there. They have never moved out because they have no reason to. It's affluent. It's got nice coffee shops and other facilities. It's quite a nice spot.
A very beautiful area. Everybody knows everybody else. Just a friendly, nice place.
Not a high crime area. You know, there's quite well-to-do parts of that neighbourhood.
Being a small village where everybody knows everybody else, crime will just be limited to your shopliftings, your maybe a Friday night punch-up or something like that, but nothing major or unexpected crime-wise really happens in Orrell.
Orrell is home to 18-year-old student Ellen Higginbottom.
She was a very popular girl. She lived in Orrell. She had lots of friends and a big circle of friends. She loved music and singing. She was very musical, but she also loved animals, particularly horses, and she wanted, or she certainly aspired to be a vet one day.
Ellen is an only child. She's very much interested in working with animals, and pretty much every photo that you see of Ellen subsequently is with animals and surrounding herself with animals.
She went to Winstanley College where she was doing her A-levels, and she was in her second year at Winstanley College.
Winstanley College would have a reputation as a place where high achievers go to. It has excellent academic grades and it attracts students from all over the northwest, throughout Lancashire and as far away as Merseyside.
And this is where Ellen, 18 years old, is studying psychology.
Like many of the locals, Ellen often visits Orrell Water Park.
Right in the middle of Orrell is Orrell Water Park, and this is a beautiful green area, and as it suggests, around a body of water. It's right on the edge of Winstanley College, so a lot of the children in their breaks will go and have their lunch around the lake or just go for a walk for a break in the sunshine. A very beautiful, picturesque water park.
This is a beautiful area. It's a nature reserve. It's an area where it's adjacent to farmland. Lots of nature around there, ponds, people go fishing there, bird watching. It's somewhere where people will go for a walk, particularly in summer, nice day like it was on the 16th of June 2017.
The afternoon of Friday, the 16th of June 2017, Ellen has just completed her final A-level exam, so She's in a good mood. It's a beautiful summer's afternoon. She decides to leave the college and go for an afternoon stroll.
She had messaged her friends and said she would meet them afterwards when they'd finished their final exams as well. And in the interim, while she was waiting for them, she said she was going to have a walk around Orrell Park, where she liked to go to enjoy the sunshine and the water and just to clear her mind after her final exam. So it was always a bit of a standing joke amongst Ellen's friends that she was prone to getting lost. And sure enough, she had gone for a walk around the lake, and at about 2 o'clock she had sent all of her friends a Snapchat saying that she had already got lost within 15 minutes of entering the water park. However, that was the last anybody heard of Ellen that day.
There are a number of hours that pass and her friends have no further contact from her. They are getting increasingly concerned because it is very out of character for Ellen, and they think, has she fallen and hurt herself? Has she got really lost? They tried contacting her, but her mobile phone is switched off. Her boyfriend and her friends started a search party. They started to search the area around Orrell Park, looking to see if anyone has seen Ellen. Their emotions are bound to be very heightened. They're bound to be frightened, they're bound to be fearful, they're bound to be anxious, because they just want to find Ellen and make sure she is okay.
So because Orrell is such a small place and such a close-knit community, news spreads quite quickly of Ellen's disappearance, and everybody becomes involved in trying to find her. It became clear, though, that without further assistance, they weren't going to be able to find her. And at about 7:20 that evening, Ellen's father called police to say his daughter was missing and that this was totally out of character for her. Police take this very seriously, and because of her age as well, and the fact that it is so out of character, they very quickly spring into action to try and find where Ellen has gone.
Police begin their investigation by gathering information about Ellen and her last known movements.
The SIO, the Senior Investigating Officer appointed, was Detective Superintendent Howard Millington. He is the man given the task of finding Ellen. Police immediately took this very seriously, and rightfully so. They immediately went into action because they were aware that this potentially could end badly. This was a petite young woman who had no reason to disappear or go missing, or had no reason not to get in contact with anyone. She was in such a good mood because she'd finished her A-level exams. She would have been in a mood of celebration. And she's doing a very normal thing. She's saying to her friends, I'm going to go for a stroll in the park. And then she disappears. Police were right to be worried.
In the initial stages of any high-risk missing person investigation, you have to clear the ground beneath you. So you have to establish the facts and what are assumptions. So what do you know? What do you think you know? And then you use inquiries to fill the gaps in. It's multifaceted. So you'll be interested in the missing person, but you'll be interested to know their network. You'll be interested to know if there's any precursor events. Has something happened on the build-up to it? But you'll need to know their background. Is there something in their background that might give you a clue as to what happened? And in some cases, people have had mental health issues. Some cases, people might have financial pressures. They might have had relationship breakdowns. Those kind of things are all things that you want to explore and then either include or exclude, depending on what you find.
Police contacted the local hospitals. They wanted to know, had anyone come in injured who was given Ellen's name or matching Ellen's description. That proved not to be the case. They then spoke to Ellen's friends, Ellen's boyfriend, Ellen's family. They wanted to know as much as possible about Ellen. They wanted to know, did Ellen have any enemies? Was there anyone who wished her any harm? Was she in conflict of any sort with anyone? But there was nothing that came up. It just added to the mystery of why did this young woman disappear?
Investigators turn their attention to Ellen's social media.
Her friends were able to say that she had Snapchatted all of them at approximately 2 o'clock that afternoon to say that she was already in Orrell Park, but already got lost within Orrell Park. But this was a big help to police because it put her last known location as being in the park, and that's where they then focused their attention on searching for Ellen. Police would have walked around the park, they would have gone round the paths, they would have gone round the more used places in an attempt to see if they could locate Ellen. Once it was realised that, in actual fact, they couldn't find her, then the search would have stepped up a parameter and they would have called in search teams.
As the hours pass and police intensify their search, Ellen's friends and family grow increasingly worried.
So as it starts to get dark, police realise that something potentially more untoward has happened here. This has a really big effect on the village. There's concern about what's happened to her. Something nefarious happened to her. Is there somebody in their midst who has potentially hurt Ellen? This is a really big concern for the village. The police then have to up their search again, and in order to try and locate Ellen, they bring in the helicopter.
This was something completely different for Orrell. People were not used to seeing so much police activity. They were not used to seeing police cars flying about the place. They were not used to seeing so many officers and vans and things of that nature at the water park. It was surreal for the people of Orrell. It was like something that they saw on television or in a movie, or it's something that happened somewhere else. It doesn't happen here, but it was.
Carrying out an area search of that last known place is vital, clearly, because if something didn't happen there, you want to eliminate it. But if something has happened there, you want to be able to establish the facts before they're disturbed and before the scene is disturbed. In this case, police used the helicopter with thermal imaging to help see if there was anything of significance. Was it possible that she'd slipped and had an accident? She could actually have been harmed and dying, perhaps had a head injury or something like that. They would have wanted to eliminate that, as well as the criminal options that may have happened.
Search efforts are focused on Ellen's last known location, Orrell Water Park.
It's a really large site, and the other problem with an area like this is there's a lot of foliage, there's wheat which grows quite high, and in order to get a scale of the area you have to get above it, because let's be honest, you could be walking past something on one of these narrow pathways and something could be a few yards away from you and you might not be able to see it.
Apart from the police officers on the ground, there shouldn't have been anybody else in that park. However, the helicopter is up there with its infrared camera and it notices a heat source running across a field which is adjacent to the water park. They then notify police on the ground that there's a heat source that isn't expected to be there, and police move into that field.
I received a phone call around about 2:45 in the morning from the night detective inspector to inform me that the body of a young female had been discovered in a field and seemed to have a significant injury.
Though still to be formally identified, police are confident that this is unfortunately the body of missing 18-year-old Ellen Higginbottom, and the person seen fleeing on the thermal imaging camera could possibly be her killer. On the 16th of June 2017, the body of a young female is discovered in a field in Orrell, a suburb of Wigan in Greater Manchester. Earlier that evening, 18-year-old local student Ellen Higginbottom was reported missing after failing to return home after a planned meeting with friends in a local park to celebrate completing their A-levels.
Given the description we had from the missing person reports and from her family, and the clothing that was in the area, and obviously the build and size and age that this young lady appeared to be, it was almost certain that it was Ellen.
So when they find Ellen, they realise that She is deceased and she has 2 very large stab wounds to her neck, either of which could have killed her. Also lying next to her is a spade, and tied around her ankles is a belt. As they look around, they realise that this belt potentially has been used to drag Ellen across the field.
There was nothing else with Ellen. Her rucksack was missing, her Lenovo laptop was missing, her mobile phone was missing, her keys were missing. There were no other personal items with her body. Police knew, obviously, straight away they were dealing with a murder investigation, and they obviously knew that this individual had to be caught.
Upon arrival at the scene, I was met by the night detective inspector, and together we entered the scene, familiarised ourselves with the area and where the body was lay, and then requested specialist crime scene examiners who will actually ensure that every potential evidential opportunity is recovered from the scene. With any potential serious crime of that nature, I, through the detective inspector, requested that certain actions were taken and taken immediately to ensure that the scene was preserved. Now, this is a large area, so it's always easy to reduce a scene if you make it too large to start with, but not the other way around, to cover the entire area so we could preserve any evidence within that area and to cover any access and egress routes and to ensure there was a common approach path. It was, I suppose you could say, almost surreal in some ways, and that something so evil has happened to this wonderful young woman, and she was in a cornfield and surrounded by a beautiful part of the locality, a nature reserve, birds singing, beautiful summer's morning. It was a real contrast between the two things in the area at that time.
This is a local beauty spot that everybody's familiar with. People have grown up there, they've then raised their own kids there, and this has been a place of safety, tranquility really, for many years, and this beauty spot has now become a place of horror.
Now that the missing persons case has been upgraded to a homicide, detectives begin the search for Ellen's killer.
Most people who are subject to homicide are actually known to the offender, known to each other, often in an intimate relationship. So it's quite reasonable in these circumstances to carry out what we call TIE inquiries. TIE stands for Trace, Investigate and Evaluate. And within that process, you would look at the times when the offence is likely to have been committed and if they can be alibied out at those relevant times. And we would initially focus on those closest to her, partners and things of that nature. Anybody, any friends, maybe anybody whom they've had a fallout with. We did conduct that process. It was only a very small TIE policy because we're only looking at a small number of people. We very quickly were able to establish that these people were not involved in any way in what had happened to Ellen. Indeed, they'd been actively trying to search for her themselves and were in no way guilty of doing anything wrong whatsoever.
They need to negate people quickly so that they can then narrow down their field of where they are looking. But obviously this didn't narrow it down, this broadened it to anybody. This could have been anybody within the area.
There is a very apparent oxymoron in such a horrific crime taking place in such a place of beauty.
It must have been devastating. It's a horrific crime, and for the community, there'll be, how did this happen? How was it allowed to happen in front of us? And of course, as you've moved forward, the communities will think about, can it happen again? They would never have expected it to have happened before, so what are the chances it could happen again? And that creates fear, and suddenly people become fearful of going to the park, which is something we should all be able to enjoy whenever we want.
You can imagine the impact on the community was significant, and there were significant concerns around the fact that nobody had been arrested, the offence had only just happened, and we have to reassure the public around their safety. And that's why in circumstances like this we do increase patrols. That's part of the media strategy as well, that message goes out there. This is a very thorough investigation which was being intensively resourced, and we would leave no stone unturned until we found who'd committed this horrific crime.
Police are also relying on the public to come forward with anything suspicious they might have seen in the area.
Not only has nothing like this ever happened in this area before, this is now getting huge national attention, and there's a genuine fear that this is an individual who has killed one young girl and is capable of doing so again. They're grasping for suspects, they're grasping for anyone who could do such an appalling thing, and in an area that small, and an area where most people know each other, there aren't a huge list of suspects.
So in these cases, you want to identify any potential witnesses. This person has got to be apprehended as quickly as possible. So a proactive media release with face to the camera to various press outlets out there was really important to get that message out that we need information, any information, as to who's committed this crime.
They need to put out messaging to the locals for anybody who might have seen anything that they deemed suspicious or was out of the ordinary for a day in Orrell. And to do this, they have put out messages on social media that have been picked up by the public. And one of these members of the public has phoned in to say that they've seen something suspicious.
This man was seen attempting to start a fire in a woodland nearby Billinge. Police go to the location and they examine the dying embers of the fire. Within the dying embers of that fire, they find Ellen's Lenovo laptop and her keys. Police can then link this scene with Ellen's murder.
The information we got subsequently led us to an area of woodland. There was actually a campfire there, and within the campfire was the burnt remains of a Lenovo laptop. Now, we do know that Ellen had a Lenovo laptop. There was also 2 Yale house keys, and we do know that Ellen had house keys as well.
A 47-year-old man from Billinge is arrested as a result of this. He is questioned and he indicates to police that yes, he did have her items, but he wasn't the only one.
Investigators must determine if the man in custody is telling the truth by locating the 2 individuals he claims are in possession of Ellen's belongings. The body of 18-year-old Ellen Higginbottom was discovered in a field in Orrell, a suburb of Wigan in Greater Manchester, on the 16th of June 2017. The student was stabbed and her clothes were found in disarray, suggesting the attack was sexually motivated. Police have just arrested a 47-year-old man who was caught burning Ellen's belongings in a fire, but he claims he did not act alone.
And he names 2 other people, a couple, a 31-year-old woman and 31-year-old man, also from Billinge, as being involved, and they too are also arrested.
Investigators question the 3 suspects in custody.
The story that all 3 people were telling police was that the items were sold to them by a man called Mark Buckley from Orrell. Buckley had given them a rucksack that contained the Lenovo laptop, the keys, a mobile phone, and he indicated to them that he had come across this rucksack and he was selling the contents on.
It transpired that between the three of them, they'd agreed to buy the laptop and a phone belonging to Ellen. And there was a suggestion they would use the money for drugs.
When the 47-year-old man opens the laptop, he sees the name Ellen Higginbottom on the laptop, and he realizes this is the young woman who has been murdered. And he panics and he attempts to burn the laptop.
As a result of destroying evidence, which is what they did, and also handling this property that had been stolen from Ellen by Mark Buckley, they were all three of them subsequently charged with perverting the course of justice and handling stolen goods, and subsequently pleaded guilty.
Meanwhile, forensic examiners have been testing the evidence recovered from the crime scene.
The belt that was found around Ellen's ankles was a male belt, and Ellen's family were able to confirm that she didn't own it, it didn't belong to her. So police sent it away for forensic examination, and they found Ellen's blood on it, but they also found a DNA profile. And the DNA profile came back as a match to a man called Mark Buckley.
Not only did we have the link through Mark Buckley's friends, and subsequently they named him as the person who brought the property to them, but we also had a good forensic connection as well. As soon as this result came through, that it was a match on the National DNA database to Mark Buckley, I immediately made the policy decision to declare him a suspect.
The police start to make plans to arrest Mark Buckley at his mother's home in Orrell, and they arrive at his house, they bang on his door, he opens the door, and they immediately arrest him on suspicion of murdering Ellen Higginbottom.
Police! You're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention one question, something you'll later align in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Would you like to make any response to that? Anything to say?
Pardon?
Anything to say to that?
Can you help me?
Yes, have you got keys on you? Or the
Yeah.
keys?
Yeah.
The keys are there, are they? Right. Okay. Well, we'll secure your property for you. Don't worry about that. We've got warrant to search the property, which is here. So we'll do that at some stage. We're going to take it back to Greta Mansion now for questioning and to continue our inquiries.
When they read him his rights, he is stunned. He is very silent. He says relatively little. In fact, the only thing he actually says is, can you look after my personal property? Can you look after my items? And the police reassure him, yes, we will. But he is completely stunned. He is not being dragged, kicking and screaming. He is just a silent man.
He's compliant. He leaves with the officers, where he's immediately put in an interview room and questioned.
So when he's questioned by police following his arrest, he denies any involvement, despite the forensic evidence with the blood on the belt, and despite the man saying that he had sold him the laptop and given him the keys. He's denying any involvement in this case.
Police look into Mark Buckley's background.
So when police look into Mark Buckley to ascertain some more information about him, they find that he's a 52-year-old male. He's living with his mother in Orrell, but he's not supposed to be living with his mother in Orrell. He has previous time in prison for setting fire to a neighbour's vehicle. And following his time in prison for this arson, he moves back to Orrell with his mother. But the public living within Orrell complain that he is behaving very strangely. He comes into the pub and he's almost bragging about having served time in prison. The people of Orrell find this very strange and they're unnerved by him. And they report back to police that this is not a reaction that they are comfortable with. and the police move Mark Buckley to a place in Preston, to live in Preston. However, he finds a reason to come back and see his mother on a regular basis, meaning that he is spending more and more of his time within the area of Orrell again.
While in custody, police identify CCTV footage of Mark Buckley in Orrell on the day of Ellen's murder.
I've found CCTV evidence absolutely crucial in a large number of the cases that I've investigated, and this is no exception.
They track CCTV from Orrell Park to his mother's house, and they find a camera on the side of a house, and this camera shows Mark Buckley at approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon of the day that Ellen was killed. They see him walking towards the park with his dog, and despite it being a warm day, he has a thick coat on, he has long trousers, and he's carrying a bag, but this bag is nearly empty. They then follow this CCTV and see him a number of hours later walking back in the opposite direction, but he has no coat on, he has just shorts on, and his bag is bulging with items. On CCTV, when police see Mark Buckley going to and from Orrell Park, he's seen with his dog as well. Following the murder, he is seen with scratches, and when people ask him about these scratches, he explains them away as being his dog had got away from him, and he had to charge through some bushes to get his dog back. And these caused the scratches and also made him hot and bothered, which was the reason for taking his coat and his trousers off. I think we can think differently about the reality of where those scratches came from and why he didn't have his coat and trousers on any longer, as they would probably have been covered in blood.
Police, when they viewed these two pieces of CCTV footage, really looked like this was a before and after of a murder scene, really. They had him walking towards the park, dressed inappropriately for a hot summer afternoon, and then 2 hours later he's coming back after the murder has taken place and he's changed his appearance. He's disrobed basically, and he has his clothes bundled into the bag. Bit suspicious looking.
Police were able to question other people, and it's evident that Mark Buckley was in Orrell Park from 5:30 in the morning. That was the first time he was visiting the park. And a number of females will say that he was walking around the park, stopping them to talk to them. He has then left the park, and the CCTV that was seen at him returning at 1 o'clock, clearly deciding he was going to try again.
Faced with the evidence stacked against him, Buckley makes a shocking admission.
There comes a point where Mark Buckley changes his tune. And he confesses to police that he murdered Ellen Higginbottom. The evidence is mounting, and it mounts to such an extent that he realizes the game's up. He confessed to police that he had killed Ellen, that he had encountered her in Orrell Water Park and had said hello to her, and then he had attacked her.
The image that the thermal cameras from the helicopter caught were Mark Buckley returning to the scene, and he was returning to see if he could bury the body of Ellen Higginbottom because he realised that police were getting close and he needed to bury the evidence.
However, he maintained there was not a sexual element to the murder. The police, however, disagreed with that. They maintained this was a sexually motivated murder. We have to remember that Ellen's clothes were in disarray. They had been interfered with.
Police search Mark Buckley's house in an effort to find evidence relating to a sexual motive for Ellen's murder.
So police then go and search the home of Mark Buckley, and within his bin they find this bag full of bloodied clothes that he's clearly tried to dispose of, but also in the bottom of this bag is what police can only describe as a rape kit. It has condoms in it, it has lubricants in it, and they say that this clearly, to them, shows a sexual element to the crime. A witness came forward to say that she'd actually been in that area at the time, and she had heard what she thought was two people having sex in the undergrowth. Police believe that that was actually the time that Mark Buckley was attacking Ellen Higginbottom.
Prosecutors now face the task of preparing for trial. While Mark Buckley has confessed to the murder, the question is whether they have enough evidence to establish a sexual motive, which could lead to a longer sentence. The body of 18-year-old Ellen Higginbottom was found in a field in Wigan, Greater Manchester, on June 17, 2017, just a day after she went missing while walking in Orrell Water Park. 52-year-old Mark Buckley is arrested and charged with her murder. Though he initially denies the crime, he changes his plea to guilty when confronted with the evidence against him.
The 4th of September 2017, that's when the case comes to Manchester Crown Court. Mark Buckley has pleaded guilty, so there will be no trial.
We heard in statements given to the police and court that Buckley sort of styled himself as a local face who was famous for going to prison. But in court, we didn't see anybody that was remarkable in any way other than the crime that they committed. This was a pathetic, immediately dislikable individual who was unable to hold the gaze of any investigation in court, stared at the ground most of the time. Although they were trying to deny exactly what happened, this was a pitiful figure that was being made to confront the enormity of what they'd done and the gaping hole they'd left in this family's life.
There was a huge level of media interest in this particular case. The press gave it a lot of coverage because this was such a desperately sad story. This was a young woman who was just beginning to start her life. She had finished her last A-level exam. She would have went on to further education and had a very successful professional career. And it was taken from her. And it's a beautiful spot. It's a place where crime like this just doesn't happen. The press were all over it, and rightfully so, because it's just horrific. Residents of Orrell actually attended, and several of them knew Mark Buckley. They went there in solidarity with Ellen's family because they were outraged. They were outraged that such a horrific crime could happen against anyone in their village. They were absolutely incensed that this had happened, and they wanted to go there to show their support.
Orrell residents who knew Buckley give statements at the sentencing hearing.
They said he was a weird man, a loner, an oddball, and someone that didn't fit in with that local community. They were ashamed of him. They were really ashamed of him and what he had done, because they realised that through his actions, that was inevitably a bit of a stain on the area, even though the vast majority of the community were totally horrified by it.
Buckley pleads guilty to this appalling, violent, motiveless crime, but he doesn't expand on any of his reasons. He pretends almost in court as if it happened, but he almost had no understanding or control of it.
His defence will say that he shows great remorse for the murder. He will say that he has no reason for the murder. He states there is no sexual element to it.
Buckley continues to deny that this murder is sexually motivated, and yet he does not come up with an alternative motive as to why he did this. He cannot answer the question of why. One of the reasons why he may have denied a sexual motivation in murdering Ellen was that it does carry a higher prison sentence. However, I think the other side of it is that this was a man who had a bit of an ego. This is a man who thought he was it. And I don't think he wanted people thinking that of him, that he was a sexual predator.
The judge, however, sees it very differently and states that there is a sexual element to this crime, and with the evidence brought forward by police, he deems that the murder was sexually motivated.
There was no trial in the end because he offered what they call an early guilty plea. Because he offered an early guilty plea, he's entitled in sentencing guidelines to what they call a discount. Buckley was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment, which is the only sentence that can be applied for the offence of murder. And he was given a minimum tariff of 36 years to serve before he can be considered for parole. Because of his early guilty plea, that was discounted by 5 years to 31 years because of the sentencing guidelines in relation to an early guilty plea. So he was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 31 years before he can even apply for parole.
It would be interesting to understand his history. I suspect there had been other events that had impacted on him as a person, and the criminal psychologists would undoubtedly be able to unpick that if he was willing to cooperate with them. And I guess if he was, that would be helpful because that might help us identify other people at risk of developing those kind of thoughts, which in his case were clearly extreme. And sadly, he had the ability to carry them out.
Despite the relief for Ellen's loved ones and the community of Orrell in knowing that this dangerous predator is locked up, their grief is still immense.
You can see where Ellen got her compassion and empathy from that set her on the early part of her course to be a vet. Her parents, Michael and Kay, despite going through an appalling, unimaginable grief, released a statement that said we shouldn't call her killers animals. Innocent people love, or at least have loved, these monsters too. And I promise you, Ellen would also tell you that nobody deserves the pain we feel right now. If a legacy is planting seeds in a garden you never get to see, then thanks to people like our remarkable Ellen, it's coming to beauty and love and kindness. Don't call her killers animals. People have also called for them to be strung up, but we've thrown enough stones in rivers whilst camping together with Ellen to tell you that ripples always reach the shore.
The ripples of a murder like this in a small community like Orrell are quite far-reaching. This is a murder that will pass through generations, particularly when people have their own children and their own daughters who are going out and going for a walk and going to more quiet locations. It will have made people more aware of their surroundings, and maybe young women who would have went out on their own would now go out in company of another person or persons. It's also something that people through the years will remember and will talk about. It's not just something that appears in the newspaper for a couple of weeks and then it's forgotten about. It's something that through the years is always talked about. People will think back and remember it because it was such a significant event in this area.
People are shaped by the place that they grow up, but also places are shaped by the people that live there. And an appalling crime like this, an atrocious murder, and a horrifying loss of life of a young girl that had got everything to live for and had never acquired an enemy in her life. It marks a place like that. I think there's definitely a period during the case and afterwards where women no longer wanted to go out and walk the dog alone. People didn't want to go for a run on their own. They were going in pairs. They didn't want to go out after dark. It scars an area and it changes people's perception of what's a beautiful and well-loved spot of nature.
The community of Orrell come together to honour Ellen's life and ensure that she will be remembered.
They wanted a lasting memorial to Ellen. They didn't want her to be forgotten. So they got a collection together and they created a bench and an area that was set aside as Ellen's area. And the bench has a plaque to her. And they also had a little box which has books in it where people can take books or and leave them, or they can take books away that they can read. And this is a real lasting tribute to Ellen, who touched many people's lives in her short 18 years.
I think Ellen's family, Ellen's parents were glad that they got that sense of closure. But they know that nothing can bring Ellen back. But they can be heartened by the fact that she is still loved and remembered, not just by those that knew her, but by the people of Orrell.